Hello, Dackland Radio. This is Campfire Tales, and I'm your host, the Old Man of the Adirondacks. Or, I guess, the Grumpy Old Man, as some are beginning to call me. I sure don't know why. Well, it's been a pretty slow week here after Memorial Day weekend last week. It was a good weekend. Lots of people around. Thanks for coming up, everybody. Thanks for helping our community. You can reach me at oldmanadk@gmail.com, or have a group on Facebook, Old Man ADK. I would love to hear your thoughts, your critiques, your stories. I would love to see pictures. Any adventures you guys are having out in the woods, out in the wilderness would be great. Share with me, guys. Share with the community that I hope this Old Man ADK thing with Campfire Tales will someday become. Last week we had a tragic and sad tale of how the green hatchet was created. The tragic life of who we now know as Daunchy. The creation of the green hatchet, and the death of Daunchy's father. A tragic tale, but one that had to be told. Today we're going to move to something lighter, something a little more fun. This is just an adventure of our hero, Tom Foolery, and his wanderings out in the snow in the Conjomuc Valley. So without further ado, I give to you Chapter 3. It was a cold, dark night in a small and dreary cave nestled in the backwoods of what is now known as the Southern Adirondack Mountains. It snowed last night, a lot. Tom Foolery hates snow. The fire that was his life in this cold, nasty weather was just coals. "I need to move south," grumbled our hero under his breath. This was the worst part of cold weather, leaving the warmth of one's furs and blankets and getting one's derned fire started again. Being a bit of a slow learner, Tom still wore only his loincloth to bed in colder weather. While this may be an awful thing to behold, believe me, I know it for a fact. No, don't ask, but it is much awfuler thing to behold when it's warm out. Fire now burning hot and warm, with a kettle hung to boil water for coffee. Tom sits, his hand gently stroking the handle of his hatchet, and plans for a day out on the Conjomuc. "Boil already," Tom blurts out anxiously. He has yet to learn that a watched pot never boils. Foolery was addicted to coffee from his first sip. Hot and a little bitter, just like Tom found the women or woman that he had met. Finally, Tom sits Indian style with coffee in hand and runs his fingers through his gnarly beard. Foolery plans to put on his snowshoes and trudge through the new snow to check his trap lines. Hopefully there will be something to harvest with his bow as well, as his stock of meat is low. "Darn snow," Tom growls as he makes his way out of his cave, using his whole body to clear a path in the snow. Crawling to his feet and covered in snow from coonskin hat to buckskin boots, snowshoes were great, but in the light powder, Tom was still up to his knees. It was going to be a long day. As Tom struggled along his trap line, he gathered his prizes: 1 otter, 2 beaver, and 3 rabbits. At least the rabbits will serve as food for the day or so. Sitting on a stump to rest for a bit, Tom opens his pack and pulls out some stale bread and jerky he had made in the early winter. Salty, dry, and lasts forever. Would have been a great lunch if not for all the fur he had to pull out of his mouth as he was chewing. You see, Daunchy sometimes helps with things around his cave. There was no getting around all of his fur or hair or whatever you want to call it. Thankfully, Daunchy is away for a bit. More than likely, he is annoying someone else with all of that back fur. Yuck! Crack! Tom hears as a branch breaks just over the next hill. A series of cracks follow. Cautiously, he stands to his feet and grabs his bow and quiver of arrows. Crouching down to be stealthy, Tom makes his way to the crest of the hill and peers over the top, seeking the source of the breaking branches. Tom hears a series of deep grunts to his left and slowly turns his head. And there before him is a sight he had only heard about in tales told around a campfire. It's a Yeti! A darned Yeti, Tom thinks to himself. A very frustrated Yeti, he quietly sneers mischievously. This could be fun. Time for some tomfoolery. This Yeti is about to be punked, for all you young'uns. Side note, I, the author, assure you, this has nothing at all to do with beef jerky. I repeat, I, the author, state your name here, do solemnly swear that this has nothing to do with the Sasquatch and beef jerky. I was told by my almost lawyer friend that I had to read this in order to protect myself legally. A few hours later, as Tom carefully kept an eye on his new friend, he also used his trusty hatchet to set a series of traps to have some fun with the 9-foot-tall biped that looked as if it could easily tear out a tree with its bare hands. Still unseen by the Yeti, Foolery uses a bit of trickery to draw the beast into his first trap. It is what Tom referred to as a spruce trap. Thankfully, all this snow had made for the perfect time for such a trap. You see, deep snow tended to bury spruce trees quickly and leave the area directly under the boughs of the tree void of snow. If an unknowing Yeti, or any other critter for that matter, were to wander too closely to the buried spruce, he would fall through the snow and then immediately be covered with the rest of the snow gathered in the branches above. Perfect for this already agitated Yeti. The trap worked much better than Tom had expected. Not only was the poor Yeti covered in snow from the trap, all of its thrashing about set off a veritable avalanche from the surrounding spruce trees as well. Tom almost felt bad for the gargantuan guy. Moving carefully for the next trap, Foolery has to climb to near the top of a very tall spruce tree. This particular tree had many, a plethora, if you will, branches covered in new snow. Hiding his gear, Tom starts to climb, careful not to disturb the snow from the branches. His trap is now set. All he has to do now is get the Yeti here. Tom was counting on this critter being both smart and curious. Turns out he was right. It took the Yeti a fair amount of time to calm down after being covered in so much snow. Yeti began to take in his surroundings. A branch that should not have been broken here, and a hatchet mark on a tree trunk over there. It was then he began to understand that he was not alone. Using his Yeti hands, Yeti did indeed pull a fair-sized tree up from the ground and proceeded to fashion a very large and very heavy club. He then began to look for more evidence of this person in his area. Eventually, finding a trail leading away, the Yeti cautiously follows. Perfect, Tom grins quietly to himself. As the Yeti wanders cautiously closer, Foolery can hardly contain his enthusiasm. With a whoop, Tom begins to shake the top of the tree, and as the snow starts to fall from the top, it knocks the snow from the branches below. Poor Yeti reaches the base of the tree at just this time. Flop! Is the thunderous sound this epic amount of snow makes as the Yeti is buried. The Green Hatchet Man uses this distraction to gracefully fall from limb to limb until he reaches the snowpack below. His plan to reach his gear and make his way to his next trip is interrupted by both an angry scream from a now furious Yeti and a mighty sweep of a tree/club that just happened to catch Tom square in the center of his forehead. Were it not for the slippery nature of his trusty coonskin cap, he surely would have been slain by such a nasty blow. Instead of simply smashing in Tom's head, the blow instead smashed into the bridge of his nose and then his lips, rendering him once again deaf, dumb, and stupid. Tom, thoroughly dazed and astonishingly confused, could tell that he was moving, probably being dragged, he wagered, due to the throbbing pain in his right leg and his head being pinballed from tree to tree, to rock, and back to tree. The DDAS, deaf, dumb, and stupid, and pronounced DADAS, was continuously being knocked into him until he eventually lost consciousness. Upon waking, Foolery finds himself hanging above the Kunjamuck by his hands from the same tree/club that had knocked him DADAS. Slowly spinning in circles, Tom is able to take in his surroundings. The sun is shining on fresh snow, so much so that it takes several long minutes for his eyes to focus properly. Suddenly, he is falling. Sploosh! Just as suddenly, he is back in the air again, and wearing only his loincloth. He begins to shiver. Through his now chattering teeth, Tom hears a sound unlike anything he had ever heard before. Shaking his head to help clear the DADAS from his melon, his eyes fall on a rather peculiar sight. It appeared to Tom that the Yeti was laughing. It sounded a lot like Jabba the Hutt in Star Wars. Not that Foolery can make this distinction, but for this story's purpose, it really does sound like a very large slug, with hands, laughing. Once again, Tom is dunked, this time twice in rapid succession, and plopped, not gently, on the bank of the river on his backside. Youch! Tom hisses through his now blue and black and bleeding lips. He is truly a sight to see. Both eyes now black and blue, nose squished under his left orb. That, combined with his blue bloody lips and tattered green loincloth, made the mighty Green Hatchet Man look quite pitiful. The Yeti then placed Tom's dry clothes next to him. Quietly dressing, Tom is as miserable as he had ever been. Once dressed, he was pushed by the tree/club wielded by the still gently chuckling Yeti. Foolery is gently prodded to his gear. Every last piece was apparently gathered by his captor. With hatchet on his hip, pack on his back, fully loaded with his tools and rabbits, beaver and otter, and snowshoes on his feet, he again was prodded. Now, following the trail Tom had left this morning, going back to his cave. The return journey was not as hard now, as the trail had been already broken. Upon reaching his cave, the Yeti made himself at home on Foolery's bed and promptly fell into a deep slumber. Tom started the fire back up and continued with the chores that needed to be completed before he too went to bed. Tom gathered as many furs and blankets as he could and found a place to curl up in another corner of his cave and miserably drifted off to sleep. It was a dark night in a small and dreary cave nestled in the backwoods of what is now known as the southern Adirondack Mountains. It snowed last night, a lot. Tom Foolery hates snow. The fire that was his life in this cold, nasty weather was just coals. I need to move south, grumbled our hero under his breath. This is the worst part of cold weather, leaving the warmth of one's furs and blankets and getting one's darned fire started again. Slowly making his way to his feet, Tom realizes something. He is not so cold. Looking down, he sees that he is not only wearing his trusty loincloth, but his clothes as well. It's not so bad as previously thought, getting up in the morning when it's cold out, with clothing already on to stoke his fire. He may be a slow learner, but when something is learned, it is learned well. Tom and his new Yeti friend had many adventures that winter. Tom even began to think that winter was not so bad after all. The end. That was chapter 3. Our hero, Tom Foolery, has a new friend in a Yeti. I have no idea how long they're going to stick together. I have no idea what other adventures they may have. If you have any ideas, I would love you to get in touch with me. I would love to share them. I would love to write new stories with somebody. If you have a desire to write with me or give me ideas, look me up. Send me an email, oldmanadk@gmail.com, or my group, oldmanadk, on Facebook. I'm around quite often too. Most of you know who I am and what I look like. I promise I don't bite.